What I'm going to show you now is using the HTTP client and just a little bit of information about how I'm going to use it. I'm going to build an ASP.NET MVC4 web application. Again, I am in Visual Studio 11 for those of you that are on earlier versions of Visual Studio, specifically Visual Studio 2010. Note that I am just using the .NET Framework 4, so you can do all of this inside of Visual Studio 2010, and you can download the web client through NuGet as well, so you don't even have to install the whole ASP.NET MVC4 beta. I'm going to create a web page that's going to display some tweets that I'm going to get back from Twitter using their search API, which is an open API, doesn't require any authentication or anything complicated like that. So I'm going to go ahead and create this project as an intranet application. Now, once this project is created, I'm going to go ahead and modify some of the code. Since I'm right here inside of the controller with the action, I'm going to go ahead and put in some code here. So what I want to do is I want to create a model that is essentially a list of tweets. So I'm going to say list of tweets. I'm going to go ahead and have Visual Studio generate a class for me. Now, the next thing I want to do is obviously get a hold of the client. So I'm going to say new HTTP client. And the HTTP client is in the system.net.http namespace, which again, because I'm using ASP.NET MVC4, it's already included as a reference in my project. What I want to do then is tell the client to do something. And what I'm going to do is say, I'd like you to get something async. Now, the thing I wanted to get async is obviously some HTTP URI. So that URI is going to be search.twitter.com, search.json. So you can imagine that I'm going to get back some JSON, and I'm going to search for tweets about Pluralsight. Now, what this is going to return to me is a task. Right? Get async is a method that returns a task of type T, where T is that HTTP response message. And so the question becomes, what am I going to do with that? In .NET 4, where we don't have the await keyword, the typical pattern is to tack on to the end of the task returning method, continue with. So I'm going to say task.continue with. And that's going to take as a parameter an action, which is going to take as its parameter task of HTTP response message. So I'm going to say task with message. Now, this is going to happen asynchronously. This is going to also happen asynchronously. And my method here is a synchronous method. So I need some sort of synchronization. The simplest way to do the synchronization is just to call task.wait. And then, of course, I'm going to pass in my model to the view. Before I do that, let me go ahead and actually process the message. So again, what I'm getting back here is a task. So the task is going to have a result. And that result, as you can see from the IntelliSense, is task of type T, where T is the HTTP response message. And then I actually need to process the content. So I can say response.content.read as async. And there are a number of different methods here to read the response content using different formatters and with a couple of different semantics. I'm going to say read as async and say I would like a JSON object. So again, as I said, this is a JSON object or API that I'm calling. So I'm going to call this JSON task because again, this is the task-based API and everything returns a task. So what I need to do again is do something similar to what I did here with this task, which is, how do I decide how to approach this? The other common way, just so I can show you both sort of approaches of calling a task-based API inside of a synchronous method. And again, not to promote too many other Pluralsight courses, but we do have a great course on just that in our library. You might want to watch that as well. I'm going to say JSON task.wait. And then after the wait, I know that the result is there. And so I'm going to say JSON object equals JSON task dot result. Right? And you can see now from the IntelliSense that I'm getting back a JSON object as my result. now what I want to do is actually process the result. So I'm going to use a simple link statement here. I'm going to say model.edgeRange. And then I'll say from JSON object in JSON object results, which is going to be a JSON array. I'll actually have to cast that as well. I'm going to select new tweet. And I want to have a name property. So I'm going to say name equals to JSON object from user to string. And then I'm going to say text equals JSON object text to string. And now, of course, these properties aren't available, but I'm going to go ahead and tell Visual Studio to create them for me. And now the only thing I'm going to have to do is go over here and make sure this class is public so it can actually be used. And there we go. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and go into the view now and modify that a little bit just so it gets displayed in a reasonable way. I'm going to delete this top section. I don't really need that. I'm going to put a header here that says tweets. I'm going to go ahead and sort of take apart this section and remove the bottom section. And now all I have left is some LIs, or one LI, I should say. I'm going to generate multiple LIs by doing a for each. So here I'll say for each dynamic item in model. I'm going to move this HTML into the curly braces of the for each. And here I'm going to say item.name. And here I'll say item.text. Now I'm going to go ahead and say debug, start without debugging. And hopefully if all my code is written correctly, I'll get a list of tweets about Pluralsight. And there we go. We can see a list of tweets, and I could go ahead and refresh this and do caching and all sorts of interesting things with it. But this is the basic operation of using the new HTTP client, this new task-based API for integrating with HTTP endpoints.